A major shift is underway with southeast Queensland cementing its place as one of the fastest growing areas in Australia.
If more people keep coming, we'll get further and further behind. So some breathing space would be very welcome.
3 words: cost of living. Surely the biggest concern for many Queenslanders right now. Brisbane's rental market is bucking national trends.
The out-of-control price of the housing market made the Great Australian Dream a fantasy. And the cost of living crisis saw the largest energy price rises ever in the country here in Queensland.
Here's what Premier David Cassaform doesn't want you to know. Queensland is absorbing over 104,000 new residents every single year through interstate and overseas migration, and the state is only building 36,000 homes annually to house them. That's a shortfall of nearly 70,000 people per year with absolutely nowhere to live. And it's destroying Queensland's housing market from the inside out.
The volume of registered bidders at auction are probably at the highest that we've seen for some 6 to 12 months.
While the Premier announces a $2 billion residential activation fund that won't deliver homes for years, Queensland's social housing waitlist has exploded to 52,031 people, a 4.1% jump in just 3 months. That's 20 additional Queenslanders added to the waitlist every single day. And here's the brutal truth. Queensland is now officially the epicentre of Australia's housing crisis. Rental vacancy rates sit at a catastrophic 1.1% in Brisbane. Median house prices crossed $1,011,000 for the first time in history. And families who moved here from Melbourne and Sydney thinking they'd escape to affordability, they've jumped straight into a nightmare. That's worse than what they left behind.
You're pretty hard-pressed to find a rental anywhere on the northern Gold Coast for under $600 a week.
In this video, I'm breaking down the exact migration numbers the government won't publicise, why Queensland's construction sector can't keep up, and how this housing crisis is about to get catastrophically worse. Let's start with the data, because the scale of this migration crisis is absolutely cooked. According to the Queensland Government Statistician's Office, the official source for population data, Queensland received 29,910 net interstate migrants in the year ending June 2024. That's people moving to Queensland from other Australian states, minus people leaving Queensland for elsewhere. But here's where it gets even more dramatic. When you add 74,932 net overseas migrants on top of that interstate flow, Queensland absorbed a combined total of 104,842 people through migration alone in just 1 year. Now let's talk about where those interstate migrants are coming from. New South Wales lost 31,183 people interstate in the year to March 2024. Where did most of them go? Queensland. The pattern is crystal clear. Movement is predominantly from suburban Sydney into southeast Queensland. Victoria's story is equally telling. During the COVID lockdowns of 2020 and 2021, Victoria experienced massive interstate migration losses, mainly to Queensland and Western Australia. By mid-2024, that had stabilised to net positive of just 664 people, basically neutral. Translation: Victorian families who left during lockdowns never came back. And new families are still choosing Queensland over Victoria. Now here's the critical question. How many homes is Queensland building to house these 104,000 plus new residents per year? Queensland builds approximately 36,000 new homes per year. That's it. When you've got 104,842 people arriving through migration alone, not even counting natural population increase. The maths doesn't maths. Even if you assume families of 3, which is generous because plenty of singles and couples are moving, that's still a shortfall of roughly 34,000 homes needed just for migrants, plus whatever's needed for natural population growth. Let that sink in.
The only way to slow rising prices in the market is to build new homes across the city.
There is a lot of focus on getting more housing supply built, but it's going to take some time.
Queensland has basically zero housing supply left over for young Queenslanders trying to move out of home, families upgrading, or anyone else who isn't part of the migration wave. And here's where the crisis gets even worse. Queensland's social housing waitlist. Queensland's social housing waitlist hit 52,031 people in March 2025, a 4.1% increase in just 3 months. That's 20 additional people joining the waitlist every single day. Not families, people. When you count for household sizes, that's potentially 8 to 10 families per day being added to a queue that already takes years to clear. The waitlist grew 11% in the year prior, adding 1,800 Queenslanders during the September 2024 quarter alone. And here's what the previous Labor government built to address this crisis. An average of just 509 social housing dwellings per year over the last decade. 509 homes per year for a waitlist that's now over 52,000 people. The maths is absolutely cooked, so Queensland is absorbing record migration numbers, and housing supply can't keep up. What's happening to prices? Brisbane's median house price hit $1,011,000 in June 2025. 5 years ago, June 2020, it was $558,000. That's a $453,000 increase, or 81.2% growth in just 5 years. Brisbane is now more expensive than Melbourne, median $948,000, and more expensive than Canberra, median $981,000. It's Australia's second most expensive capital behind Sydney, and it's not slowing down. In October 2025, Brisbane recorded monthly growth of 1.8% and annual growth of 10.2%, adding $25,074 in value in a single month. The rental crisis is just as cooked.
Did I expect to be homeless? No. And I'm even out of the room sharing market, house sharing market. You know, they charge, people want $300, $350 a week for a room in a share house.
Brisbane's rental vacancy rate sat at 1.1% in August 2024. That's catastrophically low. For context, a balanced rental market has a vacancy rate of 3 to 4%. Anything under 2% is a crisis. And rents, they've exploded. Compare that to Melbourne, 2.2% vacancy, and Sydney, 1.8% vacancy. Brisbane has the tightest rental market of any major capital. Compare Queensland's situation to other states dealing with similar migration pressures. Victoria has stabilised with basically zero net migration, but they still fell 20,000 homes short of their building target, keeping rental vacancy rates hovering at 2.2%. New South Wales NSW is actually losing over 31,000 people interstate, still missing building targets, trapping renters in a tight 1.7% vacancy market. Then there's WA, absorbing 13,500 migrants, but building less than 28,000 homes. A mismatch that's driven vacancy rates down to a critical 0.9%. Queensland is receiving more than double Western Australia's interstate migration, but WA has an even tighter rental market because they're building fewer homes relative to population growth. The pattern is clear. Every state with strong migration is experiencing a housing crisis. But Queensland is unique because it's getting hit from both directions, massive interstate migration and massive overseas migration at the same time. So how did Queensland end up in this nightmare? It's not one factor, it's a perfect storm of policy failures, construction bottlenecks, and demographic shifts colliding all at once. Factor 1. Queensland can't build fast enough.
Supply shortages to skills shortages, increases in cost of labour and doing business, add on top of that interest rate rises and inflationary pressures, you've got the perfect storm.
Queensland's construction sector is struggling to deliver homes fast enough. The state is building approximately 36,000 homes per year, but industry experts say Queensland needs at least 50,000 to 60,000 annual completions just to keep pace with current demand, let alone catch up on the backlog. Why can't Queensland build faster? Construction costs have exploded. According to industry data, construction costs have surged by up to 40% since the COVID pandemic. Timber, steel, concrete, everything got more expensive. Labour shortages pushed wages up. Supply chain issues caused delays. An apartment or house that cost $300,000 to build in 2019 now costs $400,000 to $20,000. But sale prices haven't risen by 40% in all areas, meaning developers can't make projects financially viable. Land supply bottlenecks. Well-located land close to services and amenities is in short supply. According to the Queensland Productivity Commissioner, lot registration data shows an alarming shortfall in available land ready for development. Infrastructure delays. Even when land is available, essential trunk infrastructure, water, sewerage, stormwater, roads, takes years to deliver. Without that infrastructure, you can't start building homes. Factor 2. The migration wave is structural, not temporary. Queensland has been receiving net interstate migration for decades. This isn't a COVID anomaly. It's a structural, long-term pattern driven by warmer climate compared to southern states. Lower cost of living than Sydney and Melbourne. Historically, though, that gap is closing fast.
In terms of cost, like for what we were renting in Melbourne, it was actually a lot easier. It seems like it's a little bit more competitive. I'm actually surprised at how many people are coming up to viewings.
Lifestyle appeal, beaches, outdoor living, less urban density, work from home enabling relocation for sea change and tree change opportunities. During COVID, this pattern went into overdrive. Melbourne's world record lockdowns and Sydney's extended restrictions pushed thousands of families north to Queensland permanently, and they haven't gone back. Overseas migration is also structural. The federal government sets overseas migration targets, and Queensland receives a proportionate share based on its population and economic strength. As long as Australia maintains high migration targets, currently around 250,000 to 300,000 per year nationally, Queensland will continue receiving 70,000 to 80,000 overseas migrants annually. Factor 3. The 2032 Brisbane Olympics effect.
Queensland is predicted to be the next property market goldmine as the state prepares for the 2032 Games.
Brisbane will host the 2032 Olympic Games. That's driving massive infrastructure investment. Cross River Rail, $7 billion. Brisbane Metro busways. Olympic venues across southeast Queensland. Roads, bridges and public transport upgrades. This infrastructure boom is creating jobs, which attracts more workers, which creates more housing demand. It's a self-reinforcing cycle that will continue through 2032 and beyond as Queensland leverages the Olympic legacy. Factor 4. Queensland's investor rental crisis. Unlike Victoria, which has actively driven investors out with punitive taxes, Queensland has tried to maintain investor participation. But it's not enough. Queensland's rental yields are better than Melbourne's, averaging 4.3% gross in Brisbane compared to Melbourne's 3.7%. But they're still not attractive enough given rising interest rates, land taxes and management costs. And with vacancy rates at 1.1%, investors face tenant demand but also regulatory risk. Queensland's tenancy laws have tightened, making it harder to terminate leases or increase rents quickly when costs rise. So what is Premier David Crisafulli's government doing about 104,000 plus people flooding into Queensland every year with nowhere to live? In March 2025, Premier Crisafulli announced a $2 billion residential activation fund to fast-track essential infrastructure, water, sewerage, stormwater, roads, needed to unlock new residential developments. The fund is designed to support the government's target of delivering 1 million homes over the next 2 decades. Half of the funding, $1 billion, will be dedicated to regional Queensland. Applications opened in April 2025, with funding available from July 2025. By June, the fund was significantly oversubscribed, attracting $1.79 billion in infrastructure funding requests from more than 170 applications. Sounds good, right? Here's the problem. Problem 1. Infrastructure takes years to deliver. Even with funding approved in July 2025, the actual water, sewerage and road infrastructure won't be completed until 2026, 2027 or later. And only after that infrastructure is in place can developers start building homes. Translation: this fund won't deliver a single completed home until at least 2027, probably 2028 in most cases. Meanwhile, Queensland is adding 104,000 plus new residents every year, right now, who need homes today. Problem 2. This doesn't address the social housing crisis. The $2 billion fund is for enabling infrastructure to support private development. It does virtually nothing for the 52,031 Queenslanders on the social housing waitlist who need affordable homes immediately. The government has committed to delivering 53,500 social and community homes by 2044, an average of about 2,700 per year. But the waitlist is already 52,031 people, growing by 20 per day. At that pace, the waitlist will never clear. It will only grow. Problem 3. 1 million homes over 2 decades sounds ambitious, but it's barely adequate. 1 million homes over 20 years is 50,000 homes per year. Queensland is currently building 36,000 per year. So the target requires a 39% increase in annual completions, sustained for 2 full decades. Is that achievable? Maybe, but only if construction costs stabilise, labour shortages ease, land supply increases, and infrastructure funding flows consistently. That's a lot of ifs. And even if Queensland hits that 50,000 per year target, that still might not be enough if migration continues at current levels. Here's the math. If Queensland receives 100,000 plus new residents per year, and you assume households of 2.5 people average, that's 40,000 homes needed just for migration. Add natural population increase, and you're looking at 45,000 to 50,000 homes needed annually just to maintain current conditions, not to catch up on the existing shortfall. Here's the truth about Queensland's housing crisis. The state is absorbing 104,842 new residents per year through migration alone, 29,910 from interstate and 74,932 from overseas, while building only 36,000 homes annually. That's a structural shortfall of nearly 70,000 people per year with nowhere to live. Brisbane's rental vacancy rate sits at a catastrophic 1.1%. The median house price crossed $1,011,000 for the first time in history, up 81.2% in just 5 years. Queensland's social housing waitlist reached 52,031 people in March 2025, growing by 20 people per day. While Premier David Cassaform announces a $2 billion residential activation fund that won't deliver completed homes until 2027 or 2028. Tens of thousands of Queenslanders are competing for rental properties that don't exist, buying homes they can't afford, or joining a social housing waitlist that grows faster than homes are built. This isn't a beat-up. This isn't media exaggeration. Queensland is officially the epicentre of Australia's housing crisis, according to the University of New South Wales Breaking Ground report, with homelessness support demand increasing at the fastest rate in the country. Melbourne families who moved to Queensland thinking they'd escape to affordability have discovered they've jumped from one crisis into another. Sydney families considering the move? They'll face the same reality. And Queenslanders who've lived here their whole lives? They're being priced out of their own state. I'll be covering Queensland's housing crisis every week, tracking migration numbers, construction completions, government policy responses, and rental market conditions. Subscribe to Aussie Explained so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.